I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step.
Just let go.
Hey everyone, I'm going to share who is on the podcast with me this week, and then I'll give you a quick update on Lincoln. Polina and Alex from Universal Standard are on the show with me today. This is one of those classic cases where they saw a problem in their own personal lives, and then they thought, what can we do to change this? They had zero entrepreneurship experience, but they did have a ton of passion and interest in fixing a problem. So that's what they've done. Universal Standard is technically a clothing company, but really it's a much bigger concept than that. Polina and Alex are changing the way we experience clothes. They're changing the universal standard. They thought about how these numbers on labels have so much influence on our lives and how they can trigger the internal bullies that tell us that we're not worth it. They basically took their naive understanding of the clothing industry. They really didn't know anything about this industry, and they used it to their advantage. They used it to innovate the way things are done and completely create a new system. One of the things that's really unique about Universal Standard is something called Fit Liberty. You can buy a piece of clothing, and if your size changes, you can send it back. It's as simple as that. And they'll send you a new one without any charge. So your size does not have to dictate your wardrobe. In this episode, we talk about how Alex and Polina actually took the leap and decided to press go on this idea, what that looked like in the beginning, the early decisions, the why not now, and how the fact that they knew nothing about this industry served them well, and it continues to serve them well. We also talk about how they are complementary of each other. Their skills are very different, and they've found that perfect fit. They have a system where they mix emotion with data and data with their emotions. And it's a pretty unique philosophy. They're truly innovating the clothing industry. Changing gears for a moment, I will give you a quick update on Lincoln. If you're new to the podcast, or if you've missed a few episodes, then this is probably new to you. Lincoln is my son who was delivered at 27 weeks. I went into labor on a layover in Denver. Long story short, he was 3 months early. He was born at 2 pounds, 3 ounces, and he's been in the NICU for the past 5 weeks here in Denver. He's doing really well. He's just hit the 4-pound milestone, which means he's almost double his birth weight. He's just alert and loving life. So if you want to follow along his journey a little closer, you can follow #BabyLincolnLogs on social media, and that's where we'll be. And one final little update. So you hear me talk often about the Renegade Brand Bootcamp. This is a program for female entrepreneurs to really level up and to get aligned where their passion, purpose, and skill collide. So over the past decade, I've learned a lot about what works in business and what does not. As an entrepreneur, I'm sharing all of that. So if you're interested in taking your business to the next level or launching a new business, or maybe you have an idea that you're kind of close, but you're not really sure exactly how this will come into the world, check out renegadebrandbootcamp.com. We will be announcing the dates for the fall program very soon, and you can be the first to hear if you sign up to be notified. We tackle the most taboo topics on the Why Not Now show. Oftentimes, you're hearing guests share things they've never shared before. In the spirit of things we don't typically talk about, you should know that the Why Not Now show is supported by Poo-Pourri, the original before-you-go toilet spray. It's magic. My friends at Poo-Pourri have literally taken the smell out of you-know-what. This pure blend of essential oils stops bathroom odor before it begins. Visit poopourri.com, and Why Not Now listeners get 20% off with code WHYNOTNOW. That's all one word. And you can hear the story about Poo-Pourri in our interview with founder Susie Batiste. That's Why Not Now episode 28. Poo-Pourri is also available at Target. Polina and Alex, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your time.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely.
We're so happy to do this.
I am very excited. And let's kick things off as we typically do. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now?
For me, this was a two-part question. It started with why not, which started many, many years ago because I'm a woman of a certain size. I wear size 18 to 20, and I've always had a lot of trouble representing myself through my appearance in the way that I would like. So this has been rolling around for a very long time in my mind. I spent many years living in Tokyo where it was absolutely impossible to dress myself because the sizes were even that much smaller. Living in Paris, living in Moscow, living in New York, these were the capitals of the world, and there was no place for me to find, what I consider to be the armor that you wear into the world to represent yourself in the way that you'd like to represent yourself. So it's been rolling around in my mind for a very long time, but I don't think it turned into a why not now moment until Polina and I met and really sort of saw this problem for what it is, but also had the skills to try and enter this arena in a real sense. I mean, looking back on it, it's almost laughable because we knew absolutely nothing. But even that served us well. There were moments that, led to tears or hilarity, but it served us well not to know many things because we had to discover them. And we discovered how to do a lot of things in a totally new way. But there was a tipping point moment after we met that made us think, perhaps this is the time to do something.
And the why not now moment happened. Alex and I both found ourselves living in New York, and we didn't know each other. I moved to New York after living abroad for a while. And when I moved, I didn't have a job, didn't have a network, and basically knew one person in New York City, and was introduced to Alex through a former colleague. We met and just became friends. About probably a year into our friendship, we were both invited to go to an event. I was still unemployed after that year and was excited to go because I thought it would be a great networking opportunity. Alex all of a sudden tells me that she doesn't want to go. And I say, why don't you want to go? And she says, I just have nothing to wear. I said, you live a couple blocks away from Fifth Avenue. Let's just go buy you something. And that's when she basically looked at me like I had two heads and said, do you know there's not a single store on Fifth Avenue where I can walk into and buy clothing for myself? I think I said, you're lying or you must be lying, because I didn't think that that was possible. That was the first time that this idea of not everyone being able to shop wherever they wanted was revealed to me. I realized that this whole world was basically behind a veil. And unless you are someone who is suffering from the lack or have close friends who are suffering from the lack, you are just not aware of it. To cut a long story short, I can be quite persistent. I still definitely wanted to go to this event. So Alex said, fine, let me show you where I can shop. And she took me to a department store and we walked by all the beautifully merchandised floors. She, I think, took me to the furniture floor, and there next to pot and pans and couch cushions and last year's bikinis was this small section filled with mostly polyester. And this is where Alex said we had to choose from. At that moment, the company wasn't quite formed at that moment, but at that moment is when Alex and I started talking about what can we do to change this? And can we come together and create a brand where it doesn't matter if you're a size 2 or a size 32, that you could shop at any store, any website, and that the only question that you would be asking yourself is, do I like this? And you would never have to ask yourself, does this come in my size? And that was the why not now moment for us.
Wow. It's incredible because I'm feeling all these emotions as I'm hearing you say this story, having been in those vulnerable spots as it is just in dressing rooms, but then also thinking about, not even having the opportunity to, shop at certain places. And then the question is why? And Alex, I love how it seems like this was a why not that you'd been brewing on for so long. And the now factor came in when Polina came on the scene too. And it was a matter of timing. And the story is so innocent and organic that it's just that classic problem solution. However, I know it's never that easy. As you navigated this idea, how did it turn into a reality? What did some of those conversations sound like to get it from this idea that sparked at the top of this department store into, okay, we're going to do this? Because that's like the sweet spot of where so many people are right now.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a red pill, blue pill moment where, once you sort of peek behind the curtain, behind that veil that Polina was talking about, you sort of see a completely different reality. And it's quite shocking because this is not just about, throwing some fabric on your back. We all know that clothes are much more important in our lives. We know that, I believe I read somewhere that people make up 93% of their mind about who you are moments after they see you without you even opening your mouth. So being able to present yourself in a certain way is very important, not just as a form of self-expression, but also as a form of presentation. It's a language in and of itself. And there was just nothing out there that allowed me to be who I felt I was or who I wanted to be. And we're now talking about 100 million women, 70% of the women in the United States alone. It made very little sense from a reality perspective. And I think that was the compelling moment for us when I felt the emotional aspects of this. And of course, Polina, being the business mind behind this, saw the opportunity of building a business around it.
Yeah, and I think, we started in a very natural way in terms of just looking at the opportunity, looking what actually existed, looking to see how we could change it. So for me, this was the first time that I was entering this space. Alex has been living in it all her life, but we knew that it was one of those things that we wanted to do of go big or go home. And before
I believe that's exactly the wording that Polina set down at the very beginning of this was, we're going to go big or go home, which scared me a little. That she knew what she was talking about.
But we were planning on bootstrapping. So we wanted to put some of our own money into this to start with. So for me, it was really important before we got outside investment or before we even invested our own money, that it made sense from a business perspective. So I started looking at the industry and I started seeing that the majority of clothing available in this space was fast fashion. So it was the $19.99, the $9.99 price point. We also started asking ourselves, why was that the case? Why was it that if clothing happened to come in size 14 and above or 10 and above or whatever that cutoff point that someone once determined was, why was most of it made of lower quality materials? We also started to think about what type of clothing we wanted to make. So we started looking at other brands that we admired and went as far as going back to other department stores, looking at the care labels to see where clothing was made.
Awesome.
And that was kind of the way we started, is very naturally like, okay, we love this fabric from Rag and Bone, and we love this fabric from Helmut Lang. Looks like it's cotton, looks like they make it in Peru. And that's kind of organically how this whole thing came about.
I think it's very important to say that we knew absolutely nothing about the manufacturing process. I don't think it was possible probably to know less than we did when we started our business. But in a strange way, it really, our own innocence helped us, because it prevented us from making presumptions, or it prevented us from following the footsteps of the people who had set the track that we wanted to change. So we actually had to reason it out ourselves. We had to start from square one, look around, and really set before ourselves the task of, like, okay, if you had to build a business, what would you do first? It was as elemental as that. And as Polina says, we turned over care labels to find out where the things that we thought were the quality that we wanted to make were being made. And we just sort of went from there in a reason out kind of perspective, like, what would you do next? And that kind of led us on some very interesting trips to Peru and to China, and it was quite an eye-opening experience.
I love that you shared that and gave it more context, this concept of not knowing anything about the manufacturing world and probably other aspects of the business too. And for those listening that are thinking about a why not now idea, but don't necessarily have the specific skill set, or it's an industry that you haven't worked in, I hope you take this story to heart, because it served you so well, it seems, in the innocence of being able to innovate from scratch with those fresh eyes. Otherwise, you would have had a template that would have been the old way, right, of the way it's always been done. And it's so refreshing to hear that, because I hear it often. We recently had Jen Rubio from Away on the show, and she said a similar thing, and same with Julia Cheek from Everlywell. So it shouldn't be a deterrent. Obviously, you have to surround yourself and go figure out how you want to do it and be resourceful. But that's, I think, really encouraging for people to hear that you don't need to be an expert in a field necessarily.
Absolutely true. Not only do you not need to be an expert, but your lack of expertise can actually lead to innovation, which is what we found, because we asked ourselves the reason, not just why not now, but just why not? When people said this is not how it's done, we would sort of think about it and say, why not? And then we would kind of proceed from there.
Yeah, one really good example of that is when we finally figured out a way to source the factories in Peru, and we made our way down there. We were sitting in a factory and we were being asked various questions, and one of the questions that we were asked was, what are your grading rules?
And you have to imagine this is a long table with actually mostly men who run the factories, are professionals with, a pattern of many years of working in the industry. And we've somehow found ourselves sitting across this long table from them.
And this is us trying to get them to work with us, because that's even a process in its own, because no one wants to work with someone who's never manufactured before, has no financial backing, and has no clue what they're
and has
doing.
very, very low minimums.
Right, with your...
So
But yeah.
they were asking, what are your grading rules? And I literally had to take out my phone and Google grading. And once I saw what it says, and grading is basically a formula that's used in the industry to adjust sizes. So people have a sample size, and then they use a formula to go up and down from that size, and that's how they make other sizes.
It's a very important question. But the fact that Polina had to Google what that term was gives you some idea of where we were starting from.
And because once we Googled it, it didn't make any sense to us that you would only use a formula to go up and down in size, we actually ended up completely using a different process to size up and down. And we decided, why use a formula when you can actually fit the garment on every size model and improve your fit? So that's one example of using our naivete to hopefully the benefit of our customers.
It's a great example.
We created something called micrograding, which is a term that we've been using and that I've heard various people using now, which is very gratifying. But exactly as Polina says, it came out of our lack of understanding why something would be done in a way, even though it's been done so for a very long time, why would it not be done better?
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. If you are digging this podcast, please do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us. Also, after recording more than 100 episodes, I've created a bit of a cheat sheet on the top 5 things I've learned from renegades and how they get from idea to action, from dreaming to doing. I will email you the downloadable PDF when you subscribe to my newsletter. Just head to amyjomartin.com and click on Connect with Me. That's such a good example of how you were able to invent a better solution. And I have so many questions for you. One of which that keeps popping in for me is, so we obviously live in a world of consumerism, and you mentioned the 67 to 70% of women in the U.S. wear a size, 14 or above. Why hadn't there been more businesses catering to this market? Because it seems like such a land grab from a business opportunity. Were you shocked when you looked at the data? I know you had the emotion and the data mixed to make your decision. And yeah, why?
There are a lot of reasons. Some of them are systemic. Some of them are really quite practical. It's much more expensive to make a dress in a size 32 than it is in a 2, but you can charge different prices, which means you would have to raise the costs of all the bread and butter sizes that you've had beforehand if you're sizing up from a smaller size. There's a lack of expertise. There's not a lot of people out there who know how to do this right. I think perhaps one of the most insidious kind of reasons for all of this is that fashion forever has been exclusive. It's been the antithesis of inclusivity. It's been a sort of archetype. Every brand has their own archetype around which consumers revolve and try to get as close to as possible. When we sort of saw this as something that could not be sustained, especially with 70% of women not being able to participate. So we came up with our own kind of Copernican version of the solar system where the customer was at the center. And it's the brands that should be aiming to satisfy the customer. We wanted to get rid of the archetype and make the kind of clothes that allowed the individual to choose who they wanted to be and how they wanted to wear them, which is kind of the direction that we decided to go in.
That makes sense. And it's, thank goodness. I mean, it is such important work. And it's interesting to look at the name of your company, Universal Standard, and then to learn, as I've been reading some of these collaborations with Goop and with J. Crew, when you said go big or go home, Polina, in the beginning, is this what you meant in terms of making it an industry standard? And what does that mean for your current brand company business model?
Yeah, I think what we wanted to do is set an example for the industry. And we wanted to set an example that basically said that you could do this, that you can serve all customers, offer a really wide size range of 00 to 40, be able to represent all women in your campaigns, in your imagery, in your shopping experience. Do it in a way that is inclusive. And I think that the collaborations have been really important for us to get that out on a much broader scale. Mm-hmm. Because it's one thing for us as a startup to scream from the rooftops that we are doing this and this is the right way to do it, and that we want to change the world. But it does make it a little bit easier when you partner with like-minded parties who believe in the mission and don't quite know the exact way to go about it because it is complicated. And we bring the expertise. For example, in J. Crew, bring much more of the mainstream consumer. And we help them figure out how to expand the size range and communicate with the customer in the right way. And they help us get this mission and idea out to a broader audience. So I think it's a win-win.
And as for the name, I think that it's important to state we actually sequestered ourselves for 3 days and came up with the name of on our own. We really wanted something that sounded very industrial, architectural, that didn't denote anything, any kind of secondary meaning that alluded to plus size or inclusivity or anything like that. We wanted something that was really about structure, which at the bottom of everything, this is what Universal Standard is about, is structure in which all can participate. So Universal Standard came out of the idea of being a very kind of broad design architectural concept.
So smart. I love that aspect. It's so differentiating and it's such a statement with trying not to make a statement. So bravo.
We always said we wanted to engineer a very loud silence. So you just hit the nail right on the head.
Engineer a loud silence. That's a beautiful phrase. Oh, wow. So, this was a big pivot for both of you from a career standpoint. I mean, yes, you have some fashion background for sure, Alex, but just this notion of becoming an entrepreneur in general is also its own level of a big pivot. And definitely for you, it sounds like, Polina, with the industries you've worked with in the past, what has been your biggest surprise about the world of entrepreneurship?
That's a really good question.
That's a really good question. Strangely enough, we've never been asked that before. I don't think.
Oh, exclusives here.
I think we would both agree on the following. It's not easy, and it is a daily challenge. It's a daily beating that you get. You have to keep getting up and fighting the good fight. I think finding the right people around you is absolutely imperative, which is a very difficult thing to do. We also started off on what a lot of investors would consider a back foot because there are two of us. So there is some trepidation when you're dealing with two co-founders because relationships are, a whole other ball game that is part of this enormous undertaking. And you really do have to find the right person to partner with where you can have that give and take that is sustainable for a very long time. And, I can't speak for Polina, but I feel quite fortunate in the partner that I found in her. But then again, it was also the rest of the team that we had hired to surround ourselves with. I think the surprising thing is both how much work it is at the same time as how quickly things can happen if you have the right engine pulling all of this along.
For me, obviously, I feel the exact same way about Alex. I always say I have a husband and a wife. And we do look at this as a marriage between us. And I think that if we are strong, the team and everything that we are building stays strong. However, I would say the most surprising bit to me has been how much emotionally it has impacted me. Because when you start something and you have a big idea and you know you want to make a difference, you don't actually fully, I think, or I didn't fully understand what a difference you could actually be making. And every time we get an email from a customer and we get love letters from people just saying, finally, of you've changed my life. Where were you 10 years ago?
I'm sitting in my bathtub crying, like really emotional things.
And you start off thinking this is a great business idea. You start off thinking, I'm going to make an impact. I'm going to leave a legacy. But you really, at least I didn't start thinking about the small changes that you could make to people's lives and how that emotionally drives me and affects me and basically keeps me going on those extremely hard days that Alex was referring to.
Well, props to you both because, it's something that obviously was needed. What a deficit in the market and to have the intentions behind it that you had, I think, from the get-go. Just even, like I said, with the name and to be able to have the vision of, we just want to make this available for everyone. And however that happens, working with other brands too, you're paving the way and the formulas and this processes and systems. So what's one lesson that you find yourselves learning over and over?
One lesson. Well, we try very hard not to have to learn the same lesson over and over and over. We try to learn and adapt and hopefully, move on. There are so many of them.
I think the main lesson that we probably would agree we struggle with sometimes is trusting your gut.
Yes.
That when your gut is telling you something, you should listen. And I think if we look back at mistakes that we have made, and there has been a ton of them, if we're honest with ourselves each time, it was because we didn't trust our gut. And I think we're starting to get better at it, but it is, at least for me, a daily struggle to listen to it and to trust that
instinct.
Trust that instinct.
Yeah, absolutely true. That's a very, very true answer to that question, because your brain and your heart are always kind of fighting a little bit, but your heart, or your gut, as Polina calls it, it knows something your brain doesn't. And it's always a good idea to really sort of lean into it.
Yeah, how have you been trying to sharpen that skill in terms of just literal tactics or any tips or tricks? Because that is such a biggie, obviously, with everyone.
Yeah, we're lucky that we have one another, because you can voice that opinion to the other person and just kind of measure it, like take that temperature. And quite often when both of us have that feeling, then we know it's probably true. But we can reason anything out, no matter how complicated, no matter how divisive, no matter how on opposite ends of any issue we can always come to the right conclusion, because we discuss it and we sort of edge closer and closer and closer to whatever the truth is, and eventually do make the right decision. But the more you do this, the quicker you are at it, I would say.
Yeah, I think we have actually started ending most difficult conversation when it comes to making a difficult decision. And the question I always ask Alex at the end of it to help make the decision is, what does your gut say? So I think we've almost tried to incorporate that into the process. But I think we'd both be lying if we said we have it perfect and it works 100% of the time, because that's just not the case.
No, for sure. But it is helpful. I mean, just something as simple as having that question surface. What does your gut say? And then also, as you mentioned, having a discussion with someone else and having this partnership that you have is extremely unique. And I've often been asked by entrepreneurs, do you think I should be looking for a co-founder? And in your situation, it just appears that you are very yin and yang and have your skill sets just complement each other really well from a business mind and creative minds. What would you say to people who are trying to evaluate whether or not they should look for a co-founder?
I don't know if a co-founder is absolutely necessary. If you have just one side of those skills, you can try to hire people who will support the other side. I mean, you'd have to be a pretty amazing left brain, right brain person to be able to do both. I think any brand that you look at, has generally someone that is very good at one and then someone else who is very good at the other. They don't have to be co-founders or co-owners. If you have a brilliant idea that you want to move forward with and you are an entrepreneur and you need somebody who is going to keep that creative fire burning, you can always find someone to work for you. And the other way around, if you're somebody who is that sort of creative person who has this emotional drive to create something that doesn't exist, you can hire somebody who will help you build the company. We were just fortunate enough to do this together as partners.
I think what I would say is the most important thing, and I think why it works for us, is we are extremely different, but our values and morals, our ethics are aligned. So because we have that base that is similar, that no matter what differences we encounter in whatever business decisions or strategic decisions or whatever, we're able to rely on the fact that we have a core that's the same to get us through it. So I think if I had to give advice in terms of someone looking for a co-founder, I would say the most important thing to look for is that you have a similar base.
That's beautiful advice. So solid. And speaking of which, my final question for you both, what advice would you give to your younger selves?
Honestly, as soon as you said that, one thing came into my mind. Be less afraid. Don't be so scared to take risks. And if you are ever caught between something that sounds scary and something that sounds easy, go for the scary bit, because it always leads down a much more interesting path and a much more rewarding path.
It's a really good question. For me, it would be to allow myself to follow my passions more. I think I've always been very pragmatic and practical as I was growing up and determining what I wanted to do in my career. And it always was the practical side that won out. I think that if I was giving myself advice, I would allow myself to be a little less type A, a little more type B, and allow myself to not be so worried about the future and to really enjoy the present.
I absolutely love that too. It's such good advice on both of those ends. And I am so grateful to have had this conversation with you and for you to share. Where is the best place for people to find you online?
It's www.universalstandard.com.
Awesome. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I just want you to know that, as do, I'm sure, many of the listeners. And keep going. There's still lots more. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?